We got the cure, we got the answer to what's happening in society. We got the power to solutions and provide the healing that you need. We got the cure, we got the answer with discussions that will set you free. This is the Ark Republic, and you're listening to The Remedy. The Remedy. The Remedy.
After a lively conversation in part one, talking to members of hashtag ADOS, we moved to part two, where the ADOS members focus on what are their politics and what are their demands of politicians, especially in this major election year.
My next question is that why are Black voters always centered in the vote or die narrative during these elections? This has been going on since what, 2000? Vote or die? Like, why are Black voters? I mean, Asian voters weren't even considered in the narrative, but Yang, Andrew Yang pops up, and now there's something for Asian voters. Ocasio-Cortez, becomes a figure, and some others, and now there is agendas in order to appeal to Latinx voters and some other Latino elected officials, but primarily I would say AOC. But why are Black voters in this vote or die narrative for 20 years? I'm exhausted. I don't know about y'all, but
I mean, again, it speaks to the fundamental disrespect that comes with being the bottom caste in this country. Nobody tells the Latino or Hispanic voter, a third of whom voted for Trump, vote or die. Nobody tells that to the Asians. About a third of them went for Trump. Nobody tells them vote or die. They certainly don't tell white men and white women who overwhelmingly vote for the Republicans, vote or die. It only, comes to Black people because, as Chad said, we're expected to be herded and corralled to the polls and told how to vote. And I think the other reason is because they understand, as Malcolm said, that, white people are split, and, and as Asians and Latinos come in and assume some variant of whiteness, they behave like white people. So it splits, and the Black people in key districts and states, still constitute a swing vote. So if we don't turn out in the numbers, for them, they do not win. So this talk of down ballot absolutely terrifies them, to where, like, if I don't get these numbers, I don't get the top of the ticket. I don't get to have my way in Congress. I don't get to appoint the judges that I get to appoint. So that's kind of why they say the vote or die. And it's also kind of the trying to scare Black people to create this boogeyman within the Republican Party. But as Malcolm X, so eloquently put it, we're dealing with the fox and the wolf. It doesn't matter whether it's a fox or a wolf, or how the fox wolves or the wolf moves. They both have sharp teeth, and their target is the sheep. These are both predators. They just go about killing their prey in different ways. And, we're hitting the reset button. We're not having it.
Yeah, I agree with everything Reggie just said. I think also it just shows how we're viewed as an electorate in this country as, like Mark said, captured and also unintelligent, as if we cannot understand that vote or die just means that you have nothing to offer us, right? And so you are giving us this hyperbole, just like Trump is the boogeyman. You're giving us this hyperbole to kind of fearmonger our votes at the polls, right? I mean, I saw this ad for, shake your booty down to the polls kind of thing, right? And that, I can't express how wildly offensive that is to me, that instead of proffering some type of substantive agenda that's going to impact our community specifically and directly, what you want to do is throw a stripper on a pole and say, this is why you need to go vote. And I think that just speaks to our bottom caste status in this country, our lack of politics over the past 50, 60 years in this country, and how we are viewed as a captured electorate by the Democratic National Party, who we vote for overwhelmingly in all elections. So I don't, unless you're talking about policy, it's not just vote for the sake of voting. It's not just casting a vote for the Democrat just because they are Democrat. We are shifting this conversation from that stance, which is a powerless stance. You're not taking any ownership or any type of political power, just throwing away your vote, to a agenda stance. Where we're saying, no, if you're gonna, like you said, if you're gonna come to the Black community and you're going to ask us for our votes, you have to have something in exchange for that. And I think that is terrifying the Democratic National Party. I think it's being, the Republicans are taking notice of it, because we see, Trump coming out with his, platinum plan, which is also as offensive, but in any event. So I just think that we are shifting this conversation and we're shifting our stance. And that is what's causing this upset and this consternation across the political landscape.
And it's also, it just seems like it'll make more sense, right? In the grand scheme of things, it makes more sense. If you want me to vote, then I should get something for my vote. I mean, I don't understand. No other demographic in this country deals with this. I could only imagine that those who are fighting for DACA, if the Democratic Party came out and said, you know what, we ain't doing nothing with DACA, y'all on your own. If you get deported, you get deported. Hey, that ain't our baby. And they straight told the Hispanic caucus to kick rocks. You know what I'm saying? Because that's essentially what they're telling Black voters. They're telling us,
Take Cardi B with you. Okay,
you know
sorry.
what I'm saying? Go for it. We don't care. Just get your booty to the polls. And it goes to, I saw that video that Chad is talking about, and I thought it was very highly offensive because, number one, Black men, we get targeted so much as being misogynist. We don't protect our Black women. We're being disrespectful. We get all the tropes about why we don't protect our Black women. And then you come out with a video that displays all the misogyny and the disrespect that you said that you're accusing us of initiating. And we reject that because we should be more than that. We should be more than just a hip hop culture. We should be, you're talking to brothers who have degrees, who are very, very versed in what we do, and we're professional Black men. So we want to have a professional conversation, and that requires them to actually, give us something for our vote. And to say that I should just shut up, go to the corner and this color, and then every 4 years show up at the polls for you, and just cast a ballot, and nothing changes in my community. I think that is disrespectful. No other demographic is asked to do that besides Black people, and it goes to that bottom caste and how they view the Black voter. So now you got Ice Cube with his contract with Black America. You got P. Diddy telling Biden, "Hey, if you ain't got no Black agenda, you ain't getting no vote." I don't understand why that message is not resonating with the Democratic Party, because they see the conversations going on social media. They understand they're getting challenged on reparations wherever they go in a Black agenda, and yet and still they want to continue going down the path that led to their demise in 2016. And what I fear is that it's going to continue to go, because Black people are at the point where the boomer class, the boomer generation, is dying off. And now you have Gen Xers and you have Gen Zs and millennials who are now having this conversation. And we're going to reshape the way that Black Americans deal with politics. And it's going to either one or two things. It's either going to destroy the Democratic Party at the seams and create a new party, or it's going to drive people to go to something as an alternative, which may be the Green Party. And if that happens, then you lose your most trusted and most valued demographic. We represent 13% of the population, but we're 90% of the 90% of us vote Democratic every ballot. Could you imagine what happens when you lose 90% of your vote? That you lose that cushion. Those people who when Reconstruction happened, ended up taking over governments, taking over the Mississippi delegation, becoming governors, senators. When you lose that right there, now you're in a situation where you can no longer use your corporate lobbying and all this stuff, and it tears the institutions at the seams. So they don't want that to happen. They don't want their institutions to be destroyed at the root. So they attack us and accuse us of being, detractors. MSNBC had us listed as one of the as a misinformation campaign. on the show. And we found it to be very, very offensive, because we're not a misinformation campaign. We are an education and politically lineage-based social movement that is challenging the status quo.
So part of, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, just one last point. I think a lot of the vote or die and the way that voting is viewed in the Black community is because of this trope that constantly is put out there saying your ancestors died for the right to vote.
That's
And
what I was gonna. Okay, so I'm glad you answered
and I want to push back against that. That is unequivocally false, and it is ahistorical. Our ancestors were not on the slave ships revolting and fighting to saying, as soon as I get off of this slave ship, I'm going to the polls. Nobody on the plantation said, I sure wish I could get off this plantation so I can go vote. That we fought for freedom, we fought for power. And we did not die and march simply for the right to vote. We died for what we seeked to secure with the vote. And that is exactly what ADOS is doing today. We are expressing power. We are seeking to hit the reset button in terms of politics using the vote. We're not voting for the sake of voting. So please miss me with the ancestors died for the vote. No. My ancestors died for freedom, for justice, for equality, for ownership, for inclusion. You know, take your pick. We did not die to say, let me go check a box at the polls. We died for what was on the other side of that vote. So that's not going to work, because I heard Kamala Harris say that last night, and I'm just telling you that's a losing game. It will be a losing game in 2020, and if you keep playing with me, it will be a losing game in 2024, because a lot of our children are going to be of voting age soon, and we're getting them ready. You're going to be dealing with this for a very long time.
And just think about how disrespectful that is coming from a Kamala Harris as well. Like, coming from somebody whose ancestry does not trace back to chattel slavery in the U.S., to erase all of the struggle and all of what ADOS have put in, as you heard the brother Reggie say, to secure the vote and the resources associated with voting, right? Because politics is about allocation of resources for your group. And so, again, we're the only group that's being told, vote or die, shake your booty to the polls. You know, we see Nigerians forming caucuses, the Hispanic caucus, the Pacific Asian caucus. So all these groups are advocating for resources for their specific communities. But when we say we want to take our votes and we want to use them to allocate or secure resources for our communities, all of a sudden we're suppressing the vote, or we're divisive. So I agree with what Mark said. We are fundamentally challenging the status quo. And that's why you see these wild, unbased accusations and slanders coming our way.
So lastly on this topic, this actually goes in line of what we've been talking about, in this idea of voting down ballot is essentially a vote towards Donald Trump. Can Black people survive 4 more years of a Trump?
We've been dealing with
we survived 400 years of Trump. Don't play that game with me. Like it's like we.
I'm just asking the questions. I'm asking the questions, but I get you. I get it. Come with it.
We survived being kidnapped from West Africa. We survived the slave ships. We survived the plantations. We survived the massacres. We survived Jim Crow, Reconstruction, mass incarceration, redlining. I can survive Trump. I mean, I think we've survived 400 years of different variants of Donald Trump's. But I think the question that America needs to ask is, can you survive 4 years of Donald Trump? I'm going to be all right, because I'm coming back in 2024. My kids are coming back in 2024, and we're still going to be asking, where's the policy? Because I mean, but if America's not here in 2024, fine. I mean, if I can't have my debt paid in America, you don't deserve America anyway. So you make a choice. I'm gonna be all right.
I feel like that question is just so laughable too, because as you heard, we've been enduring 400 years of Trumps, And it's only now that Trump has made white America and white adjacent America uncomfortable that question is even asked. If Trump was just weaponizing the White House against black people, they wouldn't be asking that question of us, right? If it was just solely concentrated on us and he was just coming at us hard, they wouldn't be asking, can we survive 4 more years of Trump? Because we've been in that position before. And as long as under Obama, as long as the dominant society, the white society, is going up and to the right in wealth position, everything's okay. Everything's all good, right? It's only now that Trump has sort of brought this uncomfortability to white America that question is being asked. And what we're saying is that doesn't enter into the equation. Trump fear mongering is not something that we're going to move on. We're going to move based on agenda. We're going to move on based on what you're offering our community specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, Mark, just to piggyback, like I said, the fear mongering of Trump destroying America or institutions does not work. Like packing the Supreme Court, the same Supreme Court whose liberal justices gutted the Civil Rights Act of 1866, who eroded affirmative action. I don't have a Supreme Court. Go ahead, burn it down.
I get a lot of that. Oh, all the judges are turning in.
Yeah, I mean, and he says like he's undermining law enforcement and the Department of Justice, a Department of Justice who never gave me justice. Fine, burn it down. Trump is going to wreck the economy, an economy that I have been excluded from 1619 forward. So if you're not going to include me into the economy, fine. Nobody gets to have an economy. I never had an economy. Like because we understand the data, we know that we have been excluded from these institutions and this economy that was built for white people and white adjacent people. I've never been a part of it. So why? I don't live in the house, so I'm not going to be affected if that house burns down. I'm not in the house.
The way I look at it is just based on what Reggie and Chad said. I mean, I look at it like this: if you cared that much about these, because I saw people saying, "Oh, the democracy is getting destroyed." Well, if you look at the history of this country, we've always been in chaos. There is no United States without a revolution. You know what I'm saying? There is no United States. If Washington and them didn't decide that they were going to start throwing tea off of the in the harbors of Boston, we don't get the Boston Tea Party. We don't get an American Revolution. If the abolitionists of the North decided that they were going to come down south and say, okay, we need to dismantle slavery as an institution, then we don't get a civil war. So I don't understand how Trump in 3 years has systematically eroded every single thing that has been built by design for the last 400 years. Because as far as I'm concerned, white supremacy has been around since 400. Since the institution of this country is still here. It hasn't been eroded. So I don't understand how we as black people are supposed to bail out the country again, because we have bailed this country out so many times. We created this country, and now you're telling us that if we don't go vote, we have to deal with Trump. See, Trump destroys. He's destroying the systems the way they are. I don't think that Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, and all these other billionaires that have profited under the Trump administration, I don't hear them saying a peep about him tearing down, destroying the economy, because all of them have made billions on top of billions, and trillions of equity has been passed down between them, especially in the coronavirus era.
Right, you could buy your car, you could take your vaccine shot, and you can order from Amazon. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But right. And think about it. And if we look at these institutions, we look at Elon Musk was almost broke about 2 years ago. All of a sudden, Tesla stock just roars back, and then he splits it. He splits his stock. And people are making money hand over fist in the pandemic era. while people are literally out here dying every single day, you have white billionaires and millionaires being created because they have stock options. So as far as I'm concerned, the whole institution can burn down, and it is disingenuous to put this on black people like we are supposed to be bailing out a country who has never ever really cared about us. Black people are still getting shot in the streets by police officers unlawfully. No rules have changed. They didn't change under Trump. They didn't change under Obama. And I think that there's a love fest that black people, particularly, have to get over. We have to get over this love fest with this Obama generation type thing. It's okay to like him because he's a great orator and he can speak well, and they're like the modern day Cosby family. Okay, we get that. But when you look at policy, when it dealt with policy, and that's what we're dealing with. We're talking about political policy. I'm not talking about his personal character. I'm talking about his politics. They systematically created more white millionaires because that's what this system is designed to do. So as far as I'm concerned, Trump is not my problem. I eat, sleep, and do everything very well right now. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to sit up here and go cast a vote because you're making Trump out to be the boogeyman. Nah, you're mad because Trump is not doing your bidding for you.
Yeah, Trump is your boogeyman now.
He's your
That's what it
boogeyman.
is.
He's
Yeah.
your boogeyman because he's telling folks, and then they said that it was disrespectful for him to say that what do black people have to lose? I mean, honestly, he was telling the truth. Our schools are horrible. Our communities are horrible, and he's saying you've been doing this for 40 years. What do you have to lose? We don't have anything to lose because we've never gained anything. So I mean, 0 plus 0 equals 0.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? So in order for us to get something, we had to have had something, and in order for us to have something, that means that you have to take it away. And we have never been able to unlock the American dream. To us, it's still a dream deferred, as far as I'm concerned. So
So,
this
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Chad.
no,
Your
I'm done.
final thoughts on that? Oh, okay. All right. So I'm sorry I called you Chad. Sorry, Mark. Chad, uh, you said earlier that that one of the pushes of ADOS right now is to get more ADOS people to the polls. What is the ADOS movement doing? And also, there's been an evolution of ADOS, right? There's like chapters. How does that operate in as well as getting folk to the polls?
So it's been a very organic growth. We have all been activated. You see the brother Reggie, brother Mark in our own communities. And I think what has happened is we've reached out in our own communities for those like-minded individuals. And out of that, you've seen chapters springing up all across the country because the message resonates so clearly and loudly with ADOS people. And so I can only speak to what's happening out here in Los Angeles, but we hold, before pre-COVID, we were holding town halls where we're inviting candidates to come speak about their position, speak about their Black agenda, talk directly to the community, so then we could understand where they fall in our list of priorities, right? And what we need to see from our candidates. So we were focused on education, and we were focused on making sure candidates know that you need to come and speak directly to the Black community. And not all candidates, you'd be surprised some of the names of some of the Black candidates or ADOS candidates in LA and Los Angeles Metro that declined to come speak directly to the community. And I think that just speaks to the lack of aggressive Black politics over the past 5 decades. So leading up to this election, we've been really focused on education. We're it's going to be a different type of process with mail-in voting. So we're trying to make sure that our community understands the deadlines and the requirements for mail-in voting to make sure that their votes are counted. And again, educating them on the platforms of the respective parties, right? Both Democrat and Republican, because again, we're nonpartisan. We're about a Black agenda and reparations above all else. So, and I've quipped before that if Donald Trump comes out and he gives me a good, solid reparations plan, hey, I got no problem casting a vote that direction because I'm voting for, I don't see the person, I don't see the messenger, I see the message. So out here in Los Angeles and throughout California, that's been our focus, is just making sure people are not only aware of ADOS, not only aware of our demands from a agenda and a political perspective, but that they're also aware of the process and making sure that they're engaged in them and meeting all the requirements for mail-in voting, as well as trying to make sure folks are registered. I don't know if you're aware, but out here we have a measure on the November ballot that would restore certain formerly incarcerated individuals' voting rights. And so that's obviously a down ballot measure that directly affects ADOS, as we're disproportionately represented in incarceration out here in California and around the country. So we're just making sure that folks are aware of those type of things, aware of Prop 16, aware of an AB 3121, while it might not be on the ballot. It's something that you can pressure Governor Newsom to sign, hopefully this week, and then make sure that you're aware of what's going on with that piece of legislation. At the end of the day, we just have to be more politically aware. This has to become, as Yvette Carnell says, our lifestyle. You know, ADOS is a lifestyle, and being politically aware and active comes along with that lifestyle. So that's where we are out here.
Mark, Reggie?
Well, in terms of what we hope to be ADOS Boston, and in the same way, that's happened in LA. COVID hit here. We were meeting in person, but now, as of next month, we're going to start back up with the Zoom, and then as with anyone in their locality, the goal is to find out the specific problems within your area and how they affect ADOS people, and come up with an agenda accordingly, and then hold people accountable. For the conversations I've had with other ADOS people, we already decided down ballot. For our local races, we're going to figure it out. We're going to be looking at the mayoral race. As Andrea Campbell, my counselor has jumped in, Michelle Wu has jumped in, and of course Marty Walsh is running for re-election. We might get some other people in there. So we're going to be formulating our agenda and then comparing that to what their stated positions are, and try to find ways online to recruit and to grow our base and to put pressure, because it's definitely a sleeping giant here in the city of Boston, and like we said, with $8 in wealth, where the whites have nearly $250,000, and the average income being around $35,000, yet the average rent is over $2,000, and home ownership hasn't shifted in 5 decades. It's a really beaten down demographic that it's a very challenge to wake up. But we're going to wake them up, because there's some people watching, and they're like, I hope they're not coming, but we're coming.
And I thank you for coming to Ark Republic. I was sitting in a meeting in 2018, I think, and was it the Globe, Boston Globe, that ran that big piece that talked about wealth disparities? Well, they got a sizable amount of money in order to run apparently the subsequent town halls. Did you hear about that?
Oh yeah. There were town halls and conversation, but again, what happens is that, and Boston has a huge problem with this, because it's a very Massachusetts is a blue state, Boston is a very blue town, and just like the rest of the Democrats, they specifically enumerate the problem like, oh my gosh, we have this huge wealth gap, and then when it's time for solutions, they pivot to women and minorities, which is a Nixonian policy, because that was the Office of Minority Business Development came out of Richard Nixon, and the term minority was meant to expand that definition and to just flatten and erase, to pick out certain Black success stories instead of doing the politics to make Black communities successful. So I find it interesting and also frustrating that the so-called left is embracing the Nixonian bait and switch. That's what I'm dealing with here in Boston when we have these conversations.
Okay. And Mark?
Here in Columbus, our chapter here, we've been partnering, we've been coalition building more so. We have this Columbus Freedom Bloc, which is a coalition of a bunch of different activist groups. And we're kind of working on criminal justice reform. And we have all the judges in this area up for a re-election or election. Um, and we have been challenging the judges because a lot of the issues that we have are, different depending on what court it is, systematically affect, ADOS people. So we have been hosting candidate forums. We've had two so far. We have another one scheduled for October the 16th. And we've been inviting people to come in and out. We've also, we are very, very nonpartisan. We have Black Republicans, Black Democrats, Independents all in the chapter, and we actually, endorsed a Black Republican judge last year because she had a Black agenda. So it is, to some people, it pissed off the Democratic Party that we did it. She won overwhelmingly because we got out and knocked on doors. We've been heavily involved in the recall of our mayor. Our mayor Ginther completely reneged on what he said he was going to do with the police department. He promised when he was campaigning that he was going to hire a police chief that was going to be a reformer and reshape the police department and the institution of systemic racism that they have been applying to the Black community. And all he did was take the earn-on tag off the person that was already sitting in there that he had appointed. So we started a ballot measure to recall him. They didn't think it was going to be successful. Well, it was. We needed 15,000 signatures to get the recall as a ballot measure on the ballot. For November 3rd, we were able to get 22,000 signatures that got certified because they threw out a bunch. They came in and said, "Oh, these people, oh, this is not this person's signature." So they tried to, the Board of Elections tried to play, those politics and try to throw away a lot of votes. But we were able to secure enough votes to make it a ballot measure. And so we've been out educating the public on this recall measure. If we're successful in recalling him with the majority vote, then he has to step down. He automatically loses his mayorship, and the city council president becomes the interim mayor until we have a special election next May. So that's what we've been working on. Obviously, we're down ballot all the way here in Ohio. But we have a lot of ballot measures that we have been fighting for, and we just been out, giving out literature, hosting town halls so we can educate the electorate. And I don't see that changing moving forward. That's pretty much our vision and our goal with ADOS Columbus and ADOS Ohio as a collective, because we do things. We have 4 chapters in the state, and we kind of move together on a lot of different issues. So if there's something going on in Cleveland, we go there to support those guys in Cleveland. Same vice versa, they come down here to help us out. So we're just pushing as a collective for the upliftment of all ADOS people throughout the state. So
I hope you are enjoying this episode of the Remedy podcast on Ark Republic. Tune in to all of our podcasts as well as sign up to be an Ark Republican member, where you receive firsthand information as well as information on all of our discounts as an Ark Republic member. Remember, membership is gangsta. Enjoy the show.
About how many chapters are there? Do you know?
I got it. It was around at least 30, Mark, around the country.
something like that. They keep springing up like wildflowers. So little weeds keep sprouting. So
and how many states are represented? How many states you would say?
I know.
I'd say at least half of the state, like 20 to 25 states, perhaps.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's also ADOS adjacent I guess organizations, if you will, not necessarily chapters, but you have projects like We Will Not Suffer in Silence. You have the Black American ADOS Caucus, and then you have media figures, independent media figures like Jamie Fowler. You'll have different activists and voices. You have Be the Power. And of course there's Professor Darity. There's so many moving parts that it's hard to just confine it just to chapters. Like, this is a full-fledged grassroots movement that's kind of made its way into the consciousness of all of Black America, not just ADOS.
So is there a website that's going to be up that where the ADOS chapters that have specific ballots and everything that they're addressing in their specific cities and regions that people can look at, so for me, before I vote, I go on Green Party side and, and see, okay, what is their take on that? Is there going to be a website, or is there a website that can direct people, just if they don't listen to anything, they could go to the website and see what they can do in that area, in their area?
Yeah, I think that's coming. There's certain organizational infrastructure that's definitely being put in place so that the masses of people at the grassroots can find community and advocate accordingly. But that's definitely coming, because like this is a long-term project. This doesn't
Right.
stop. This doesn't stop at the 2020 election, or not even the 2024 election. Like we said, we're hitting the reset button. This is a reorientation of America and their relationship to ADOS people, and a reorientation of ADOS people, and a reawakening of Black politics across the board.
But I think everybody needs space to grow. We got to give each other space to grow. Chad?
Just say specifically just to Los Angeles, if you're in the area, you can visit ADOSLA.org. It might be ADOSLosAngeles.org. And then there's an ADOS California website as well. But just on the kind of chapter note, it's hard to give you a number because they literally are popping up daily. Like, we're seeing activists. Wow. Like I got a note from someone in Las Vegas the other day looking to start a chapter. We're starting chapters outside of the metro areas in Inland Empire, because again, a lot of ADOS in California have been dispersed into very remote areas. Yeah. So chapters are starting in places like Palmdale and Lancaster and kind of outside,
which are very needed at this point. Yeah,
exactly. Which is outside though of what you think of when you think about kind of metropolitan California or Southern California, right? So, and you have to also remember, just from a organizational perspective, we're still very nascent. We're still very young, right? And growing and learning on the fly, sort of thing. Because as you heard, very few of us had any kind of political background coming into this. Right. So this is not your Soros group that has funding, coming through the back channels or anything like that. We are unfunded, we are unbought, we are unbossed, but we just love each other and we love our people, and we're organizing on that basis. So, and the growth has been exponential and incredible to watch, over the past 18 months or so.
What have been some of the biggest growing pains? Because I remember tuning in, let's just say around February of 2019. And then I came back to it a couple of months later, then, came back to it. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of differences, right? There's been some, some clashes, some huge clashes, some small clashes. Maybe not so what are the growing pains, but what have you learned? What are some of the biggest lessons learned in the growing pains?
I think for me, it's been more so staying the course. ADOS people, we are fractured. We're hurt. And we've had to bear the grunt of a lot of oppression. So it is this movement is opening up wounds. And it's like, like Dr. Joy DeGruy said, this post-traumatic slave disorder, right? So we're dealing with trauma in our community, and some people don't want those wounds to be opened up. And what it does is it allows when people start to get awakened to this, they understand. The challenge is that because our community has been so fractured, it is so many detractors out there that would try to misinformation. We really don't encounter the misinformation coming from white folks. It's our own people that are doing it. It's more so the infighting amongst the diaspora that we deal with. And then, because we knew the media were coming. We already had got privy to the media coming that were going to try to destroy us before we even got started. Because this narrative, this reshaping, this reimagining Black politics does not fit the status quo. Growing, I think, and it also is because we have dealt with so much. Our people are expecting instant results, but they don't understand that this is a long-term, that this has been long-term strategy and policies that have we can't expect that one day that we're just going to snap our fingers and everything that's happened over the last 400 years is going to go away. You know, we're just not going to, there's not a reset button that we could just hit on the table and say, okay, we're just going to destroy every single thing all in one day. This is a process. And I think sometimes people get frustrated. They don't think we're moving fast enough. And because we're so hurt and so fractured that everything has to be a now. So as long as we stay the course and keep pushing, we're going to get those incremental changes, and it's going to be massive over time. It's just keeping our people motivated to stay the course. I think that's been pretty much the the consensus as the movement, because people have come, people have go. We've had people have left and decided to go do their own things and whatever. But at the end of the day, we're still people, and we're gonna we're still here, and we're gonna keep fighting.
I think so. One of the biggest growing pains has been the shock to the psyche that comes from an understanding that we have gotten it wrong pretty much from the civil rights era forward. Like when you look at the data that tells you and demonstrates that education does not close the racial wealth gap, that mimicking other minority groups does not close the racial wealth gap, that family composition, vis-a-vis single motherhood or this or that so-called intact families do not close the racial wealth gap. It's a blow to the psyche to where you have had this wrong orientation about yourself, and I think a lot of people have a hard time because they say, hey, well, I've heard all of my life, I just need to buy black and just need to circulate the black dollar. And when you have invested so much of your research and even your time and advocacy to that end, only to be told that you're wrong, that it's hard to deal with. I believe it's also hard to deal with, some of our brothers and sisters who've arrived recently to the country, that by the data and by an accurate reading of data in the history, that you are part of the same neo-colonial shell game as the Irish were. Like that, even as you suffer under racism and white supremacy in this country, that's a hard pill to swallow, and it's a lot to unpack. So a lot of people will just say, xenophobia, or the other ADOS person will say, you're just being negative. You just don't want to build. You just don't want Black empowerment. Instead of really sitting with the data and what that means. For me, I've seen that's the hardest part, and that's where you get the most pushback from your own people as well as from other groups. Just that hammering in on the political education and the understanding of your condition. It's like I'm not so much at this point worried about engaging the white supremacists and white people. I'm worried about the white person on your shoulder, on my shoulder. That's the white person I got to deal with first before we go out there and fight. So that's been the biggest growing pain that I've seen.
Chad, did you want to add anything?
I'll just add quickly. I guess it's not a growing pain, but just a learning that's been kind of critical for me. I studied political science in college, but I was very much disenchanted with politics coming out of college. So never wanted to engage in like the political space, just because I felt like it was kind of a powerless space. I mean, you go to sleep election night broken hungry, you wake up election morning broken hungry, right? I've said that before. So I never really saw the power in politics as it was specific to ADOS. And so one of the biggest learnings for me is how powerful we actually are in this process. And going back to kind of what you brought up as some of the slanders and some of the objections that have been tossed out to ADOS, I kind of quickly came to the realization that people don't fight this hard against you unless you have power, unless you are affecting the conversation, unless you are influencing the conversation. So for me, kind of the biggest learning is that, this politics and policy, it doesn't dwell in this ivory tower that's so far removed from us, right? Like we have the power in our communities and in ourselves to influence policy, not only at the local level, but at the national level. As we see now, our Congress people and even up to the White House, they have to address their Black agenda and reparations. So that's been kind of the biggest learning for me, is that we are powerful when we get on the same accord and we beat the same drum consistently, day in, day out, even past elections, even off election cycle, that we are a force to be reckoned with, and that our politics can't be ignored if we are on that accord. So that for me has been I don't know if that's a growth pain, but it's positive in kind of how I view things.
How do you see the ADOS movement? Now we're moving on. So you know what? I hope, I thank you for privileging me this time. I didn't think it would take this long to get to where we got to, but I wanted it to happen organically and flow, because in my opinion, when conversations like this go deeper, I just feel like people haven't been given the space to talk through and talk about it. So I appreciate this immensely. And I'm learning a lot as well. How does ADOS's reparations movement distinguish itself from the previous movements, and what makes it more effective in your opinion?
I think one of the first things is the data and the history. We all have an understanding, generally speaking, of our history, that this country was built on slavery, but not until recent years, within the past 10, 20, 30 years, have we really uncovered the data and what that means in terms of the wealth disparities, in terms of brilliant economists such as William Darity and Professor Kirsten Mullen, who've been able to uncover what that means in terms of the racial wealth gap, to where we look at works like Half Has Never Been Told, to where we learn that the actual bodies of our ancestors were worth more than all of America's resources combined. So when you get that, when you're able to absorb that kind of data with a new generation, it kind of reframes and refocuses not only the problem, but also what the solution would be. And also, I would say, social media is a big part of it. And part of it is just, the youth being awakened and politically active, because during the civil rights generation, it was fueled largely by students, by young people. So I think that's part of it. I think the social media piece is a big part of it, to where you kind of see what happened with the Arab Spring. You see how different movements such as Black Lives Matter was promulgated through social media. So I think timing has a lot to do with it. I think also, when we look back from 1619 to 2019, 400 years, I think it's just all of those events and different environmental factors coming in, and to where ADOS is in the right place at the right time. So I think that's kind of part of why we've taken off in the way that we have.
I mean, excuse me, when I hop on social media, and every time I do, if I do the hashtag, ADOS to see what's up, it's like as soon as somebody drops that hashtag, it's like bees on honey. I mean, like, damn, these ADOS streets is hard. I hope people prepared to be up in it. So yeah, so that social media aspect is important. Yeah, Mark?
And I think it is also because we're unapologetic in what we say
very
and how we
unapologetic.
operate. We have taken away the ability for people to say, go sit in the corner and be quiet.
Right,
Because
and it's creating your own narrative.
It's creating your own narrative, and it's shaping the conversation, and it's creating that, they love to quote John Lewis, and, he said it's good trouble. Well, ADOS is good trouble, and the more we fight,
people gonna fight you for that one.
yeah, the more people fight, right? The more we fight, the more we uncover. And the more we uncover, the more we educate, and it brings more people to the movement than we do. It's funny how some people are profiting off the back of ADOS, the movement itself, because their careers are getting sprung because they are using the misinformation and detractors to come up with videos and get them position themselves to secure a bag. and we're calling it out. We are equal opportunists when it comes to getting with us going at folks. We don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, black, white. If we are pro ADOS, and if we feel that it's something that you're saying, what you're doing, what you're advocating for directly disproportionately affects us, we're going to come at you. If you call us Russian bots, we're going to come at you. If you try to say that we're xenophobes, we're going to come at you. So it's reshaping the narrative, and it's about pride. It's about owning, because for so long it seems like some black people were trying to not attach themselves to slavery. Like, it's like, we understand our history. We have to be proud of the accomplishments of our ancestors, because they didn't, we're on their shoulders, and if it's not us that's fighting for the things that they could not have in their lifetime, I would be doing a I would be doing a disservice to my great grandmother, who was a sharecropper, who turned from being a sharecropper to cleaning up white people's houses in the 1980s as a maid. I would be doing a disservice to her and everything that she had, that she endured in Georgia, if I'm not out here fighting for my daughter, my three daughters. So I think what they didn't realize, they thought that this was a fringe movement and that we were going to go away because the media said we were going to go away. And they thought that they had enough power, from an entertainment standpoint, to destroy us, via social media. And what they found out was, we are just as social media savvy as they are, and we probably we have people in our movement who are just as powerful, and we can get our voices heard. So it's easy for me to go on Twitter, hit hashtag ADOS to see what's going on, and then it's easy for me to tag Reggie, tag Chad, and because we all follow each other, so it's easy for us to round up our troops and get to work. And then we strategize. We're strategizing. We collectively across the country, we all are still fighting for issues in our communities, but nationally we're fighting together as well. So it makes it this is a unique situation that I don't think that nobody thought was going to happen, and it's because of social media that we're able to do this. And I think that's the difference between us and every other organization that has tried to do this before us. The fact that they didn't have the technology and the communication, the technology to communicate as fast as we can. you know so it's no longer people having to fax letters off, or try to jump on the phone. I can text real quick, or I can send a social media post to everybody, and everybody can get it within a matter of seconds. So I think that's what separates us.
Mark, I'd like Chad, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, I think the brothers nailed it. I think data, timing, and social media have kind of been the three factors that have set us apart. I mean, being able to see the data and being able to see, the wealth of middle black families, $8 in Boston, 200 in LA, 150 or 200 in Columbus, and or 150 in Columbus, right, Mark, and then 200 in LA. I mean, that kind of gave us concrete data points and metrics that we hit. It's one thing to walk into your local representative's office and say, hey, we're doing bad out here. It's another thing to walk in there and actually have the wealth data to show how badly we are doing out here. And what are you going to do about this? So I think the availability of data was critical. From a timing aspect, I'm not sure if ADOS is as effective as it is now if we didn't have an Obama, if we didn't have that lesson of, hey, it takes more than just a brown face or a black face in a high place to be able to correct our situations, right? We had to go through that, an Obama to a Trump, to be at the point that we are now. And like Reggie said, I feel like it's a convergence of all those things, kind of the perfect storm for ADOS and for ADOS politics in the current environment. And then as Mark said, yeah, we're on social media and everybody can get that smoke. If you're talking greasy, if you got something to say about us, like, we're not going to just let that ride anymore across all aspects of society, right? I don't care if you're talking on MSNBC, if you're talking on CBS with a television show, or you're on ESPN. I mean, it doesn't matter where you are talking. If you're talking about black politics, you're gonna hear from us.
Mark, I want you to start off with this question that actually Reggie kind of set up. several questions ago when he was answering about in terms of placing political pressure in the vote. He talked about the reset button, right? And that's what ADOS is. That's the momentum of ADOS is this reset button. I want to know, what does the reset button looks like? And in particular, when we were starting this conversation, you were talking about a critique you had with Maxine Waters and how it turned into like this social media battle. But in the reset button for ADOS, what does politics look like? And everybody else can ask, but I wanted to start with Mark because I think that experience kind of sets up a really great introduction into politics.
I think what it does,
Oh,
it allows.
Can you say what happened, because I wasn't recording then? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well. It actually happened in Los Angeles with Chad. Though it was more so. It was more so. You know, she got with that ADOS was meeting with her opponent.
Congresswoman Maxine Waters.
Congresswoman Maxine Waters got privy to that the ADOS Los Angeles chapter was meeting with her opponent, and because we're nonpartisan, we feel that we should be able to leverage our vote against whoever is voting. You know, who's going against who may be. You know, if the politician that's already in office is not lockstep with our views, then we should go to the opponent to see exactly what they're offering. This is the democratic process. This is the election process. So by her finding this out, and she didn't have the support that she thought that she was going to come onto a call and just straight bully our ADOS sisters on a call and tell them that this is not what they should be doing. They should be supporting her. And because they had been trying to schedule a meeting with her for 5 or 6 months prior to this, they said to her that this is your fault. And I think across the board, across the country, this is what's happening. Here in Columbus, Ohio, Joyce Beatty had an opponent, Morgan Harper, who ADOS Columbus endorsed, and it was an awakening because she had never faced a primary challenger. And we have a lot of candidates that go through and never have a primary challenge. We don't get a Ayanna Presley if there's no primary challenge. We don't get a Ocasio-Cortez if there's no primary challenge. We don't get a Lauren Underwood if there's no a primary challenge. We're not going to get a Cori Bush or a Jamal Bowman if there is no primary challengers. So ADOS is we're actually birthing our own politicians out of the movement. You had Ja'Cory Arthur who got elected to the Louisville City Council. We have Tamara Shealy that's running in a crazy jungle election down in Georgia, where there's like 9 Democrats and like 3 Republicans in it, which is absolutely insane. But we're birthing politicians out of this movement too. And there's been other ones that have, they ran or either thinking about running in the future. So I think what it is if you start to infuse people and empower them to fight for change, you're going to start to see a lot more ADOS candidates showing up on ballots across the country. And what that does is it's going to pit the establishment up against candidates that are reparationists. And I think when you start saying that I'm a reparationist and I believe in fighting for a Black agenda, it's going to put some other politicians on notice, and they don't want that. They're fearful of a primary challenge. I mean, Gregory Meeks for New York came out with a scathing argument that he shouldn't be facing no primary challengers. It's disrespectful. Even Clay said it before he lost to Cori Bush, that it was just disrespectful that this is going on. They should be fighting. They should be trying to take out another Republican. No, but how dare you think that you are entitled to a congressional seat because you're Black? No, if you're not doing the bidding for Black people, we're going to challenge you, and we may be able to get you up out of there. So I think that is what we are doing, politically, is we're challenging the status, and we're birthing out our own politicians.
So I have a question though, Mark. Is there a CBC in the reset button for ADOS? And if so, what does that and this could be anybody, what does CBC look like?
I think it's ADOS centric. I think it's ADOS focused. I think it's data driven, and it is not bending the knee to white imperialism. I think that is the new wave of the black politician moving forward. If they come from ADOS, they're going to have the history and the data to back them, and it's not just going to Washington D.C. and then getting tucked away in a office seat for 3 to 4 years and you never hear from them, and then they show back up and say, hey, it's time to re-vote for me again, do it all over again. So I think now it's causing these politicians to really have to answer questions that they have never had to answer for in the past. And when you start to challenge that, they come off as being bullies and trying to denigrate, and they're going to try to do anything possible to keep the status quo. But the problem is that they're going up against people who are not afraid of them. And we don't care about the establishment and if Reggie says it all the time, we can let Rome burn and we'll let it burn to the ground. We're gonna let it burn to the ground for a revolution. So out of the ashes come a phoenix. And I think that is the ADOS movement.
Okay. Anybody want to add, what in the reset button does politics look like for you?
Well, I think to answer your question, in terms of the CBC, I question whether we have a CBC. It exists in name only, but it's kind of like a people of color, all lives matter type of caucus, because they jump for every other issue, and fight for every other issue, but you don't see that same energy for Black people generally, and specifically for the descendants of slaves. So hitting the reset button means exactly that. Like, I don't like how this game is going. I'm starting over. So it doesn't matter how long you've been here, kind of to Mark's point, you're not entitled to this seat. You're not entitled to my vote. I'm hitting the reset button. Here is my agenda. And if your policies do not match up with that, if your record does not match up with that, if you dodge me in the same way that Maxine Waters dodged ADOS, in the same way that my people here in Boston, ADOS and non-ADOS alike can't get Warren to come to the community, Elizabeth Warren to come to the community, in an ADOS reset button scenario. Warren doesn't get Black support. Maxine Waters doesn't get Black support. And if Ayanna was to lose her way, she would not get Black support. So it literally means, like, I don't care who you are, how many times you've been running around with the party favorites or with the CBC. I don't care if you're part of the squad. I don't care if you're part of the Justice Democrats. I don't care if you're part of the Bernie thing or the Green Party. It does not matter. We are hitting the reset button, not just on the CBC. We're hitting the reset button on everyone and saying, what is your agenda? Are you working in my interest?
Yeah, I agree with everything the brother said. I'll just add that I think hitting that reset button extends to all aspects of our lives. It not only just politicians, but entertainers, musicians, athletes. If you are of ADOS and you're going to be out there in front, if you want our support, you want me to go out there and download your song or download your album, I need to know where you stand. I need to know that you have politics, or you're going to be reflective of politics that aren't just going to be about selling albums, that are going to be about collective uplift. If you're going to be on that nighttime show, you're going to be on prime time, and you're going to want to talk about Black issues, I need to know that you're going to be talking about reparations and substantive Black agenda. Like, I think that the reset button represents accountability across the board. Like, and I always say this to my wife. I was like, I'm waiting for the day when I walk into the barbershop and we're talking about who supports reparations and has a Black agenda. When I'm going down to the court to shoot some hoops, and that's the conversation happening on the sidelines, right? It has to become a way of life for us. We have to have these conversations around the Sunday dinner table. We have to have these conversations in the pews at the church. This has to be a way of life, and resetting the way that we think about politics and the way that we engage in politics and across the board in our communities.
So, in saying that, let's move to politics. The core of ADOS is reparation, and it focuses on this wealth gap. How do we close it in the reset?
Simply stated, you close it with reparations, and reparations.
But what
What
type of, reparations can come in many forms. Like, what
well
does that
well
look like?
well well in terms of the United States, it is, it's a capitalist society. Certainly, as Black people historically, we have leaned more towards uh, a collective, maybe scientific socialism. But the fact is, we live in a capitalist society, and the biggest expression of your economic well-being is your net worth, your what you own, uh, minus what you owe. And when you look at that, we are at the bottom. So one of the things that reparations would have to include at a bare minimum would be to close the racial wealth gap between ADOS families and white families, and have policies and institutions that would lock that new economic condition in place. That's the bare minimum. That of course there's other things that we would seek to have redress for, in terms of environmental racism, criminal justice reform, restoration of voting rights. But at a bare minimum, if a politician is not coming to me saying, here is my plan to close the 12 to 14 trillion dollar wealth gap over the next 20 years, we're not having a conversation. So I mean, again, reparations is not only about a check, but in this society, and given the gulf of the racial wealth gap, you are not talking reparations to me unless you are talking about a check as part of that.
In a COVID-19 existence right now, I don't know about you, but damn near everybody I know has lost somebody to COVID-19, or ineffective or non-care because of COVID-19. And also the economic ramifications that have happened, but specifically to healthcare. What has been the conversations, and what does the reset look like as it pertains to ADOS in the reset?
I think I think from a healthcare standpoint, we have to look at, are we even, do we have actually healthcare that's affordable but it's effective as well, you know? And I think a lot of it, I see people talk about the expansion of Medicaid and Medicare and all these things and those notions, but that is not real good healthcare. And we talking about, Black women when they have babies, and the infant mortality rate is very, very high because they're not getting the ADOS women are not getting the proper care that they should from the hospitals. And that's tied to the insurance. Who has Blue Cross Blue Shield versus who has Medicare Medicaid. Is certain doctors are not in that network, and they may have the training and the skill, but guess what? I don't have the resources to have that type of health care to make sure that my families are taken care of. And so, and then you have people who look at, we talk about income coming in. If I got to decide whether I'm putting food on the table or whether or not I'm paying Blue Cross or Blue Shield, a copay every month for a premium, then I'm gonna choose putting food on the table. So it puts us at an economic disadvantage when we're having to decide and make decisions based on our economic standpoint. So I think in this COVID environment, what it has shown is, um, healthcare disparities are equally disproportionate towards ADOS folks, just like the income and wealth, disparities are. There's no difference between the two. It's just, we can look at every single institution in this country and how it is designed, and we can find fundamental flaws and systematic oppression of ADOS people in every single one of them. It doesn't matter what we discussed today. There is always going to be a place where ADOS people are on the bottom. bottom in healthcare, bottom in education, bottom in criminal justice, bottom in economics opportunities, bottom in business startups and entrepreneurship. So we can keep going. I can list, we can, you can throw out every single one of those and it's always the same. It is the same system. So I think that is part of the issues is that, there has to be a cash infusion to offset that, because now you put people on a playing field where they can make that determination whether they want to have Medicare and say, you know what, I can afford to have real good healthcare insurance through these people here, and now I can have a specialist that may even be ADOS, or maybe somebody that looks like us, because we want to have doctors that understand our bodies and how we're different. I have diabetes. My endocrinologist was an Indian man until they changed and gave me a black doctor, because he understood that some things are different. Hey, you can't be eating all that stuff, man. You got to change your diet and all the other stuff. So the conversation became different. It became more about, hey, bro, I understand what you're going through, but you can't be doing X, Y, and Z. I may not have gotten that from that Indian doctor, and I'm not saying that he was practicing malpractice. I'm just saying, based on cultural experiences, that we need people that look like us that understand what we're going through.
And I think, also to your question, what the reset button looks like in COVID is the same thing that it looks like for everything else, which is specificity. When you see the numbers come out from COVID, but then you see the subsequent headlines, what they say is people of color are hit the hardest. Black and brown are hit the hardest. So even with in the midst of a pandemic, America still refuses to get specific about the health issues associated with COVID, that we are dying at the highest rates. People of color are not dying at the highest rates. Black people are dying at the highest rates. People of color are not being disproportionately affected by the economic fallout from COVID. Black people are. I mean, granted, certainly Latinos and Asians and other groups are, may experience more than whites, but Black people so far, by far, have borne the brunt of the COVID crisis in terms of infection rates, in terms of hospitalization, in terms of death, in terms of economic fallout, in terms of the maldistribution of relief from the government. By all metrics, ADOS people are still at the bottom in terms of the COVID crisis. And until Congress gets serious about this, the media gets serious about this, and most importantly, until ADOS people collectively, that we grow a spine and scream at the top of our lungs, specifically, what about us? We're going to continue to have problems, because most of our businesses are not coming back. There is a tsunami of evictions and foreclosures heading this way that will disproportionately affect Black women and their families. The incarceration rate for Black women in a lot of ways mirrored the incarceration rate for Black men, and that was before COVID. So when these evictions hit, we're going to see Black women and families on the streets in ways that we've never seen. So if the Democrats are serious when they say that Black women are the backbone of the Democratic Party, you damn well better show me policy that reflects this feigned gratitude that you have for that demographic, because what they're doing now is not it. So the reset button for COVID is the same for everything else. Specific acknowledgement and specific policy targeted towards my group.
So this is the last question. And I hope we do this again, because I think we need to do more conversation. In the past, right? I think was Mark talking about it? What happened to those 12 years after the emancipation? You're right. So these 12 years, we're talking about Reconstruction, right? This era of Reconstruction that happened, and what we know that followed after Reconstruction was, how you call it, the total dismantling of what Black people built in that short amount of time. It was like 20 years or so, like that, a little over 20 years. So when people say we need, we need to have not our own, but we need to have institutions in place that serve us properly across the board: healthcare, education, banking system. We know that we have a past that's rooted in when we did have those things, right? Because we've had iterations of those before. They were neutralized. If they were not neutralized by literal force, then they were neutralized in these other nefarious ways that were systematized and validated through legislation and a whole number of things. Not several years ago, actually, many years ago, Derek Bell, in a speech, I heard him talking about saying, Derek Bell, the civil rights attorney, said that he came to the understanding that the laws that were passed during civil rights were simply laws that those in the white power establishment knew that they could roll back. How do we have in this reset button the protections put in place so that when we enfranchise again, these things don't happen? Because policy doesn't change people. We know that.
Well, I would actually argue that we've never had an ADOS reconstruction. I mean, coming out of slavery, we were basically turned into refugees in our own country, in the country we built, right? So nobody really talks about the story of Jubilee is what we get in the textbooks, and that, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, and then we all were free and we were dancing and we were able to, build our own communities, et cetera, et cetera. But, they leave out the story of the the rampant white terrorism that occurred. They leave out the neglect that led to a lot of sickness, death, and disease, because you have masses of people migrating. We know that when that happens, when masses of people are displaced, disease runs rampant. And especially at that time, post-Civil War, where disease was the biggest killer of anything, versus warfare. It wasn't warfare that was the biggest killer, it was disease and sickness. We were emancipated into this refugee status, right? Now, through the greatness that is inherent in ADOS, we were able then to try to grasp some sort of political power, but we were still trying to plug into white capital. And so reparations for me represents payments, direct payments to the American descendants of slavery, policies that position American descendants of slavery as a preferred class in this country, and then protections to prevent a recurrence of that, white terrorism that dispossessed us, immediately, in Reconstruction and immediately following, and for the next, 150 years. So I think that reparations at its core gives us a capital base, or infuses a capital base into our community that allows us to build those institutions of protection. I likened it, and I don't like drawing parallels between groups, but if I look out at, what happened to the Jewish community post, World War II and the Holocaust, et cetera, you see that because they were not systemically oppressed through policy and were allowed to a certain extent access whiteness, they were able to build institutions that now offer them protection from a lot of what we see occurring in our communities, right? And so that's sort of where I see us in a post-reparations world, is that we're able to build our own institutions of protection and that are capitalized, where then we can protect our communities, we can make sure that policies are being enforced, and we can make sure that our people are taking advantage of full citizenship here in the country we built. So that's kind of how I view the reparations, kind of post-reparations world, and what could be considered as a turning this caste system on its head, right? And taking the bottom caste and making us a top caste in this country.
Yeah, I would piggyback off of Chad, because part of what was the failure of Reconstruction was the lack of protection. Like they began to, for a few families here and there, maybe a 40 acres and a mule there, in terms of policy, we had a rush of Black people going to Congress, but what was lacked was the protection. After Lincoln's assassination, his successor rolls back those policies and allows the KKK and Jim Crow to just run rampant. So I feel like the policies and the protections have to go hand in hand. And I think we have a great amount of history to look back on that we make sure we don't repeat it. We know that there is going to be a white backlash to any sort of Black progress, whether real or perceived. The white militias are going to have to be taken on. The white militias will have to be taken on in a real way. We're going to have to revisit fundamentally what we talk about when we talk about bearing arms in this country. We have to fundamentally revisit, the 13th Amendment. I'm not saying, repeal it, but understanding the catch-22 that happens that, except for being duly convicted, your rights are stripped away. We may have to get into the thorny issue of birthright citizenship. Like what does that mean? We would have to have be really specific in policy and protections, because whites may not be the only group that comes after us. What happens to an economically empowered Black woman under a reparations agenda? She no longer goes to the Asian hair salon or the Asian beauty store. She builds her own. So the question for me is like, how are the Asians going to react to that? In terms of economic, because they already try to shut them down.
And
they already have a plan in place. They shut.
Yeah. So
Black-owned business. Sorry.
Yeah. So the United States would have to come back and revisit that because they specifically carved out the beauty industry for Korean immigrants. But if the Black woman wants to have her own, there has to be a conversation and boundaries drawn to be like, look, this is for Black people here. You have to let them build institutions. We're going to have to figure out something else for you, whether it's convenience stores or grocery stores, in our communities are either owned by white corporations or by recent arrivals. So that America has to be reoriented and reshaped to a point to where it's almost unrecognizable. So, when we're talking about those protections and policies, in a lot of ways, it turns America upside down in terms of the caste system. We're no longer on the bottom. And I feel like that fundamentally makes people uncomfortable, and we have to be proactive in discussing what those policies and protections look like, because is going to be a lot more than just white people turning against us. And we have to be honest about that. And we also have to be honest that we have to really stamp out the Confederacy and the Confederation of America in the same way that Germany did with the Nazis. We did not do that during Reconstruction, and that was part of the problem. We have to just stamp it out, zero tolerance. The Daughters of Confederacy have to go. These statues and these flags, put them in the museum. More African-American museums, to Chad's point, like these institutions have to be built to protect us, from slander, in the same way that you have the Anti-Defamation League for the Jews. It's a lot of work, and a lot of people are going to be upset because, like I said, to varying degrees, every other group who is not a descendant of slaves benefits from this hierarchy. So we have to take it head on and honestly, or it's not going to work.
The final thoughts are yours. This is a conversation about ADOS in an election year. What are the demands? And what does it mean to have reparations? Any final thoughts before we go?
I just tell everybody to look beyond the detractors. Talk to us like you did. Invite us on your shows. Have a conversation with people that are actually in the movement, that are actually on the ground. You will find that a lot of the stuff doesn't a lot of the negativity that surrounds the movement is really from people that don't understand. And when you have a nuanced conversation with us, you'll find out that we got a lot more in common than you that divides us. We're not going anywhere. So the people can try to destroy us. They've destroyed a lot of movements. They're not destroying ADOS. This is lineage. You cannot destroy a lineage, and when you destroy a lineage, that means you're destroying the people themselves. So if a lot more gonna be coming down the pipe, we're probably gonna piss off a lot more people. But in the end, um, the end goal is to liberate our people into economic prosperity and to be able to take on full citizenship. And I'm gonna fight tooth and nail until I ain't got another breath in me. I'm gonna be fighting for ADOS. So
Yeah, I'll just echo what Mark said, because I'm gonna be standing right there, shoulder to shoulder, fighting with him. I just encourage folks to do your research, get engaged, get activated. This is an all hands on deck situation. This isn't just a few people in a few places. This is all 32, 35 million of us standing up, straightening our backs up, and saying you're no longer going to use us as the mules. You're no longer going to ride us for benefits and set asides that we get locked out of. We built this country. We are proud of our legacy and our ancestry here in this country, and we're going to advocate to redress what is owed to us in this country. So I just encourage people to get engaged and, love yourself first, and then love your people, and then love being in this fight every day, because this is an everyday operation.
Yeah, just to echo what they said, that ADOS is here to stay. There's been an awakening even among Black people that don't subscribe to the hashtag or the movement or have criticisms of the movement. There's been a reawakening of Black politics and the demanding of specific agendas, specific policies, and you just can't unring that bell. Even if ADOS goes away today, you can't unring that bell. So I would encourage, like Chad said, like Mark said, everybody, do the research, invite us to have the conversation. We're happy to have the conversation with anyone. There's some rooms I'd like to get in. I get invited, and when they find out I'm ADOS, they kick me out the room. But let's have the conversation. If we are serious about collective Black uplift within the context of the United States, you have to have ADOS in the room, or you're just going to have problems when we see you in the streets, because it's just not online. This is Black people on the ground who are fed up with the status quo. And in terms of the ADOS movement, it will be reflected at the polls when we turn out, but it will also be affected, by those who may not be down with ADOS, but who are disaffected and tired of being ignored, except when it's time to vote. Like, this is unsustainable, and I really think that the Democratic Party in particular really needs to think about its future. You are in danger of going the way of the Whigs. If you're not careful. So bring it. If you want us to bail you out again, I need an exchange this time. Black ADOS people need an exchange. Black people generally need an exchange. Poor and working class people across America need an exchange. It's time to get serious.
Thank you so very much. I hope to talk to you on the other side of these crazy ass elections. But please be safe, be productive, and like the great Nip says, it's a marathon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kaya, for having me.
Oh, thank you. It is such an honor.
We got the cure, we got the answer to what's happening in society. We got the power to solutions and provide the healing that you need. We got the cure, we got the answer, with discussions that will set you free. This is the Ark Republic, and you're listening to The Remedy. The Remedy. The Remedy.